Many Mexican prisons hold 2 or even 3 times their intended capacity. Cells built for 4 people can contain more than a dozen. Privacy? Gone. Hygiene? A distant luxury. And now, Mexico has opened a new one. A prison so brutal, so extreme, it's a whole new level of hell. They call it the end of the road, but that's too kind. It's miles from the US border, and it's a place so psychologically destructive that even hardened cartel assassins, the same men who've hacked enemies to pieces with chainsaws, have begged not to be sent there. Welcome to La Mesa. For years, many Mexican prisons were total anarchy. The inmates, not the guards, ran the show. It was a dog-eat-dog world where only the strongest survived. But now, Mexico has taken it a step further. They've opened a new ultra-isolation wing exclusively for the most dangerous cartel bosses. These are men who once ruled entire cities, now locked in rooms no bigger than a walk-in closet. No visitors, no phone calls, no light, no escape. But here's the really messed up part. La Mesa didn't always look like this. It used to be called El Pito, the little town, because the inmates were in charge. They had shops, restaurants, even brothels right there inside the prison walls. The cartels were recruiting, killing, and running their empire from their bunk beds. So what changed? One man. Since 2014, director Cesar Daniel Ramirez Acevedo has ruled La Mesa with an iron fist. Under his command, the Mexican government has quietly converted La Mesa into what is basically a human filing cabinet. They stack them, isolate them, and try to break the man before the sentence is even over. But why now? Why is Mexico cracking down with an even harsher supermax system? That's where this gets really dark, because the answer might not be about justice. It might be about revenge, or worse, control. First, let's go back to where it all began, Tijuana, a border city, a sin city, and one of the most dangerous places in the Western Hemisphere. It's a powder keg of death and desperation, and when things go wrong, they end up at La Mesa.
After he went down. At one point, it was 5-on-1. The officer gets up to fight back though, but in the end, he's just outnumbered.
At the center of this chaos is the new ultra-restrictive wing, Section 6. The prisoners here are the leaders, the shot callers. Men like Francisco, who once tortured rivals for fun, now live in a dark, airless concrete box with no soap, no toilet paper, and barely enough water to survive. The air inside this isolation unit is described as suffocating. Mold spreads across the walls like a disease. Inmates are forbidden from even seeing the sun, some for months at a time. It's a calculated system designed to break the inmate's will. And if you think the guards are in control, think again. According to former hitmen who served time in prisons like these, the real power still lies with the cartels. The guards are often forced to look the other way or risk their lives. For every prison, there is a cartel behind it. The strategy is brutal. Inmates from rival cartels are forced to share space, just close enough to breed tension, but not close enough to resolve it. The result is a psychological standoff that rarely ends well. It's no wonder La Mesa has had multiple full-scale riots. One insider describes a massacre where 14 inmates were slaughtered in a single night, and the main cartel boss was beheaded. And yet, Mexico decided this place needed to be even tougher. Some believe it's because the cartels have corrupted everyone. Police, politicians, even judges. So now, the government is fighting back the only way it can, by trying to strip them of their power inside these walls. But here is where it gets even more tragic. Innocent people like Taylor Elliott Howard are caught in the crossfire. He's an American combat veteran, a decorated Marine who served in the Iraq War. He was accused of stealing a car and sentenced to 9 years in what many describe as psychological torture. The isolation is total. No one speaks English, there are no interpreters, no calls to family, and no visits. They lock you up and throw away the key. Taylor claims that 9 inmates on his tier alone have died simply from untreated illness. This raises a horrifying question. Is Mexico reforming its justice system, or is it hiding its failure behind thicker concrete walls? According to the guards, 2 hours of sun a week is a privilege. Most inmates spend 23 to 24 hours a day in their cells, day after days, for years. The isolation is intentional. La Mesa's structure ensures inmates interact with only a handful of other people during their entire sentence. The psychological damage is so severe that some inmates have begged to be moved. Not released, just moved to another prison. The ultimate consequence is what the inmates call the hole. This is the isolation block. Dark, moldy, and airless. Even the guards hesitate to enter. Inmates here rot. Literally. There's no running water, no electricity, and no human contact. Inmates don't know when they'll get out. Sometimes it's weeks, other times never. You don't even need to be violent to end up here. Forget to wash a dish, smuggle a cookie, or just talk back, and that's enough. As the prison director once proudly said, this prison used to be notorious. Now we have everything under control. Control. That's the real story here. Not reform, not rehabilitation, but control. Because what happens when you reduce a man to just a number in a cage? You don't reduce violence, you manufacture it. If you thought La Mesa was brutal, you haven't heard what happens when the prison walls aren't strong enough to contain the cartels. Because sometimes the prison doesn't control the criminal controls the prison. And if you're a guard standing in their way, you'd better hope your family doesn't answer unknown numbers.
For surveillance, the other officer being attacked. 2 inmates and later several more join in. But then
inside La Mesa, alliances are carved out of fear and rivalries explode. Like the infamous riot described by one hitman, 14 killed, 1 beheaded, his head used as a basketball. Guards stood outside the maximum security wing and did nothing. Why? Because the cartels told them not to enter. In La Mesa, there are 2 justice systems, one written in law books, the other written in blood. That's why the Mexican government is so desperate to maintain order. Director Acevedo is the architect of the new La Mesa, a system so tight that the most dangerous cartel members don't even see each other, let alone the guards. In Section 6, inmates from the opposing gangs are deliberately scheduled at different yard times, and even then, it's only for 2 hours a week at most. If someone breaks the rules, they vanish into solitary confinement. But don't confuse solitary with safe. And still, despite all of that, the cartels manage to thrive through fear, through bribery, and through a network more efficient than the government itself. The former hitman admitted to interrogating other inmates with the permission of the guards. He had access to phones, weapons, and classified information, all thanks to cartel influence. His job in prison was simple: find out who's loyal and who's not. La Mesa, for all its structure and steel, is still vulnerable to corruption. Even the inmates know it. That's why someone like Taylor Elliott Howard, the US Marine, feels completely abandoned. The guards don't speak English and there's no translator. And that brings us to one of the most sinister elements of Mexico's new prison strategy: intentional psychological degradation. When you remove language, you remove power. When you remove sunlight, you remove time. And when you remove human contact, you remove identity. And that's exactly what happened in La Mesa before its 2002 reform. Back then, the prison was an open-air bazaar for cartel bosses who lived in luxury while poor inmates starved. There were fast food restaurants, bars, and even brothels run by inmates. Then the riots came and the debt started piling up. So the state responded by tearing it all down. But instead of fixing the system, they built a cage so tight it crushes everyone inside it, criminal or not. And it gets worse. Medical neglect is rampant. Water is rationed. Hygiene products must be bought with money from outside. If your family doesn't visit, you get nothing. You don't even get a toothbrush. That same former cartel hitman, after spending years living like a ghost, walked away. He dropped his gun, abandoned his cartel-protected status, and escaped the only life he'd ever known. Why? Because he realized that even the top men, the killers, the traffickers were disposable. He was beaten, tortured, and betrayed by the cartels he bled for. So, he started over. He became a boxing coach, teaching at-risk youth to fight, but not the way he used to. He knows what's waiting behind those prison walls. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just the slow, invisible death of everything human. So what do you think about these prisons?